Feminism and Islam. For a lot of people, just hearing those two words together feels like a complete contradiction, right? I mean, we constantly see this global debate. On one side, the mainstream narrative often paints Islam as inherently restrictive towards women. On the other side, many traditional societies totally dismiss feminism as this incompatible Western import. But what if there's a third path? Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're cutting through the noise and the polarization to objectively break down the profound theological and academic framework of Islamic feminism. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. Defining two paradigms. 2. The source of legitimacy. 3. Rethinking freedom and family. And 4. The global movement. Let's dive right in. Section 1. Defining two paradigms. To really grasp this, we first have to strip away our preconceived notions and define the different foundations these movements are built on. So, the big question: can faith and feminism truly coexist without contradicting each other? This provocative question sits right at the center of this massive global debate. Like we talked about, it polarizes those who view Islam as restrictive and those who view Western feminism as an intrusive cultural import. But Islamic feminism steps in with a third way, a framework arguing that you absolutely don't have to choose between your faith and your fundamental rights. It helps to neutrally look at the two fundamentally different starting points for achieving gender justice. Western secular feminism is largely rooted in Enlightenment ideals and secular liberalism. It often views traditional religion as a patriarchal tool, and its core goal is absolute individual autonomy. Islamic feminism, on the flip side, draws its authority strictly from sacred texts, the Qur'an and the Hadith. For these scholars, religion isn't the obstacle at all. It is actually the ultimate source of liberation, aiming for equality interwoven with honor, dignity, and faith. Moving to Section 2, the source of legitimacy. Let's look at how these feminists actually build their academic framework from within the religion itself. This brings us to the immense academic weight of the movement, highlighted by trailblazing scholars like Amina Wadud. Wadud advocates for gender equality strictly from within the framework of Islam's primary sources. The core argument here is that the religion originally granted women comprehensive rights. So the issue isn't the sacred texts themselves, it's the centuries of interpretation by male jurists who are basically reading those texts through their own cultural biases. What's really fascinating is that these scholars aren't walking away from their faith to find equality. Instead, they're performing what is sometimes called a gender jihad, a rigorous academic struggle to reclaim equality directly from the Quran. As Wadud emphasizes, the Quran views all human beings, all insan, as having equal spiritual and moral worth. In this framework, equality isn't some modern invention. It's a divine mandate. But how do they actually achieve this reclamation? Well, scholars rely on highly rigorous methodologies like ijtihad, which is the practice of independent reasoning. By critically analyzing the linguistic and historical context of the Quran, Islamic feminists are essentially peeling back hundreds of years of human culture. They aim to bypass that historically male-dominated analysis to rediscover the pure, egalitarian spirit of the original texts. Okay, if there's one vital intellectual distinction you take away from this explainer, make it this: the difference between Sharia and fiqh. In Islamic thought, Sharia represents the divine, eternal, and totally flawless path of justice revealed by God. Fiqh, however, is human jurisprudence. It's the fallible, historically contingent interpretation of the Sharia produced by mortal male jurists over centuries. Recognizing that fiqh is a human construct is a game changer because it means it's fully open to debate, critique, and reform. We see this structural critique executed brilliantly in the work of Fatima Mernissi, another foundational scholar who bravely scrutinized early Islamic society. Mernissi looked deeply into the Hadith, the documented sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. She systematically challenged specific narrations that had been used historically to marginalize women, exposing how human political motivations often twisted the interpretations of faith. Mernissi objectively argues that early Islamic practices actually granted women revolutionary levels of public participation. Women in the Prophet's time were super active in politics, scholarship, and society. It wasn't until later, during the patriarchal Abbasid regime, that the public world was rigidly coded as a male-only space. Her analysis powerfully demonstrates that women have always been the foundation of everyday progress within an egalitarian Islamic framework. Section 3. Rethinking Freedom and Family. Building on all that theology, How does this movement practically redefine the concepts of freedom and the family unit? Here we hit another really fascinating contrast. Islamic feminism firmly rejects the Western pursuit of absolute individual autonomy, where liberation often just means total independence from traditional structures. Instead, it leans into complementarity. In this view, freedom is deeply linked to moral responsibility and spiritual devotion. Sure, men and women might have different roles within a family, but they possess absolute equality in human dignity before God. They're entirely equal, even if their societal functions aren't identical. And honestly, it is genuinely incredible to realize that these specific, comprehensive rights were outlined way back in the 7th century. That's long before they were recognized in Western legal frameworks. The Qur'an explicitly granted women the right to own and independently manage their own property, the absolute right to consent in marriage, and the right to seek divorce and education. Islamic feminists today aren't asking for new rights, they are simply demanding the restoration of these historically guaranteed rights. A huge part of restoring those rights involves redefining some deeply misunderstood terminology. Take the Arabic word qawamun. For centuries, patriarchal interpretations claimed this meant unconditional male authority over women. However, by critically rereading the text, Islamic feminists argue it actually dictates a financial and moral obligation of protection, care, and mutual support. The family isn't supposed to be an oppressive hierarchy. It's meant to be a sacred, harmonious partnership of equals. Section 4, the global movement. Now let's look at how these dense theological rereadings are actively impacting the lives of millions globally today. Because this isn't just theory, right? Organizations like Musawa, which translates to equality, operate as a massive global movement for justice in the Muslim family. They take these complex academic arguments and turn them into real, actionable, on-the-ground advocacy. Their initiatives seek to show how laws based on classical patriarchal interpretations simply no longer reflect the justice of Islam, nor do they reflect the lived realities of families today, where women are so often the primary providers. Scholars like Ziba Mir Hosseini provide the essential intellectual backbone for these global movements. Her work poses a brilliant critical question. If justice and equality are the absolute central values of Islam, why are women so often treated as second-class citizens in historical legal texts? She's bridging the gap between sacred ideals and modern human rights by utilizing the religion's very own inherent tools for reform. Musawa's step-by-step framework brilliantly distills their entire approach. First, reread the texts with a gender-sensitive lens. Second, separate flawless divine sharia from flawed human thick. Third, uncover those egalitarian voices that patriarchy tried to silence. And finally, promote family laws globally based on mutual respect. They are essentially using the master's own tools to dismantle the patriarchate house and rebuild it upon its true, original, egalitarian foundations. I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. As we look at the global landscape of women's rights, we really have to ask ourselves, do true universal human rights actually require a strictly secular lens? Or could the integration of faith through rigorous frameworks like Islamic feminism actually be the ultimate key to empowering millions of women around the world on their own terms? It is absolutely a question that challenges our assumptions about religion, culture, and the true meaning of liberation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.